Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Venomancer. So Veno's a hero that's usually played as a support, although sometimes it can be an effective core. It usually depends on the patch, and if it is a core, it's usually off lane. But for this guide we're going to be focusing on the support version of Veno because it's the most common role, and it really does a lot of the same things as the off lane version. Now what does Veno do as a support? Well, this hero is all about the poison. It's a great damage over time hero, probably the best damage over time hero in the entire game. It can be compared to something like Viper, but the difference is Viper can right click more. He kind of is able to scale in that way, where Veno pretty much never does any kind of scaling right click build. I mean, maybe in the future that'll be a thing, but it's never really been a thing and probably won't be anytime soon unless they change the hero drastically. And then the other unique aspect to the hero is that it's kind of a summons hero, or a pseudo summons hero. And I say that pseudo because you actually place wards down on the ground and they can't move. So even though it's similar to Nature's Prophet or Enigma, the way you use the summons is different because they're fundamentally different because they're immobile. But before we can understand how to play Veno in general, let's take a look at his abilities. Now that we understand Veno in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that great damage over time hero like I talked about. So first we're going to take a look at Venomous Gale. This is a pretty straightforward spell. You can see the range there in the circle, and you just press it in a direction. It shoots out this kind of poison cloud, and then it slows the enemy and does damage over time. So you can see how much slower he is right now, this axe is, than the other axe. And this is really significant because even early on in the game, level 1, like this is going to be enough of a slow and long enough that you're going to be able to catch up to the enemy, have your allies catch up, cast stuns, cast other abilities, do a lot of right-click damage. It's just great for running people down or kiting people in fights even later in the game. So that's Venomous Gale, pretty straightforward. Then we have Poison Sting. This actually amps up Veno's right click, but it's not really a typical kind of right click ability like a lot of other heroes have. So, you know, Drow, Viper, some of these other heroes, or even like, this is obviously a passive, but other ones that are like lifesteal or critical hits, this is more just like a general poison ability. So it just adds a slow, so you can see you get this debuff, and it lasts for a pretty long time. So there's a slow, and there's also damage over time. So this is really effective because it obviously just is super annoying for the enemy because they're just slightly slowed just from your right click, and they just take extra damage just from your right click. So you can see one right click there. Look at how much damage this did. Now obviously you're maxing this out, but this, you know, axe is level 14, so that did what, like an eighth of his health and damage just from one right click. So this ability is very, very good. And then the other thing that this ability does is it actually pairs along with your next ability, which is Plague Ward. So Plague Ward is pretty straightforward and simple. I kind of mentioned it earlier in that this hero is sort of a summons hero because you can place these wards down on the ground, and then there's, you know, these little plague wards, these wards, and they just attack the enemy. You can see it's applying Poison Sting to this axe, which is really, really annoying. So not only can you do right click, you know, poison damage yourself, but then you also have that paired up with plague wards who themselves give vision. They also, you know, last for a decent amount of time. They have good HP, they have decent damage, so you can push towers and all these different things with it. But like, look at this axe, like he comes over here, look how long it takes him to kill this ward. It's very, very annoying, and you can place, you know, a bunch of them down over time because the cooldown's only 5 seconds. So it's just, when you have some time to put down wards and you can put down a bunch of them in a fight or defending a tower, all that kind of stuff, it just makes it very annoying for the enemy to fight into you, to deal with all this poison damage, all these slows, all that kind of stuff. So that is Plague Ward. So all these abilities, you know, they're pretty straightforward, but you can see how it can be very, very annoying to deal with all this stuff. The last thing I will say, actually, is that if I click the axe here, you can see there's 2 Poison Stings because the Plague Ward Poison Sting and the right click from Veno, that Poison Sting, is actually 2 separate things. You can have 2 Poison Sting debuffs at the same time, which is even more annoying. So you could have, you know, 2 of these poisons and the Venomous Gale on somebody, and they're just super slow, and they're just, you know, ticking away for a ton of damage. Plus, let's just refresh this guy here because he's going to die if I then cast my ult on him. And so now my ult is, it actually used to be different, and I think it's still the Ags, which I'll talk about in a second. It's kind of similar. It wasn't exactly, but it used to be you pressed R and in an AoE, you just release this poison gas cloud thing that anybody that it hits, they just do insane or take insane damage. This is a little bit different. This actually, you target one player and they take a lot of damage initially, and they're just like giga slowed, and there's like an AoE burst that comes out, and then anything in that AoE after a certain duration, it actually goes to other heroes in an AoE. So this is very, very good for not only single target slowing somebody, kiting somebody, counter initiating, but then it also works to break up a team fight, because if the allies, those enemies' allies don't, run away or disperse or get out of that area, then that hero is going to kind of like explode and send poison everywhere. So it just kind of catapults the damage, makes it even worse. So then you can cast all of these abilities together, and it just makes you have overwhelming damage over time, overwhelming slow that can be very, very annoying to deal with. And like I said, I will talk about the Ags, because this is like the old ult. And basically what this does is it kind of releases your ult, but it only releases it during certain moments. So you can see the enemy will take the poison non-lethal damage when Venomous Gale ends prematurely. So basically, if I do this, and then let's just say I buy, let's say Lotus Orb. So you can see I dispel it, and then it sends this AoE out for everybody to get hit and then take insane damage. So this is not like a ton of damage actually as it used to be. It used to be way more, but it's still like a giant AoE. So it just adds another thing that people have to run away from. And then the shard is also another thing that makes dispelling not that good, because let's say I use this latent toxicity on this axe. Now he has this on there. If he dispels it, he actually gets stunned through it. So this works through BKB, I believe, as well. So let's actually give him a BKB. Can we do that real quick? And then I'm going to refresh my abilities. I'll put this on him, and then he will cast BKB, and he's actually stunned through BKB. Now, it's not a long stun, obviously, but this can be very annoying if you press Manta, if you press BKB, and you have this on you, and then you're stunned for part of that duration, or, you press Manta to get out of a silence, and now you're stunned, and then the enemy can jump on you and all that kind of stuff. So this hero is just all around a cancer hero. Very, very annoying to deal with all of these different abilities that it has to slow and to stun and to poison over time, and to make you have to disperse and run away from your teammates and hide, all that kind of stuff. So those are Veno's abilities. Now let's jump into a game and take a look at how he's played. The first thing to understand about Veno is that he's probably the best level 1 hero in the entire game. Venomous Gale is an extremely good slow level 1, and it can basically get you first blood alone by itself. You just cast this on an enemy and they pretty much can't go anywhere. You can just right-click them a ton. Other allies can catch up, use their abilities, right-click them as well. It will almost always guarantee you a first blood unless the enemy does the two things that can counter it. And the one thing is basically stand their ground and fight. So if all 5 of them there and they kind of turn on you and then try to use their abilities, they can do that. Or you can actually get denied when you have Venomous Gale on you. So I didn't show you that in the abilities section, but if the enemy actually right-clicks their ally at the last second, when they're ticking down from Venomous Gale, they can actually deny that hero, and then you don't get any of the experience or the gold. You don't actually get first blood from that kill. So that's another way to counter it. If it didn't have that, it would probably be extremely broken. I mean, it already is very powerful level 1, but it would be even more broken if you couldn't deny. Then Veno's laning stage is pretty much the same as his level 1 strength. He excels at catching people out of position. For instance, if a hero is going to pull, let's say the support is going to pull the lane, Veno is great at teaming up with his core against that enemy core who's still trying to last hit, trying to CS, but now they're kind of out of position, they're alone. You just cast Gale on them, you right-click them, you slow them, you maybe put a ward down if you're a little higher level, and it's very difficult for them to deal with that because they can't really run away, so they have to fight, but now it's a 2v1. And so that's really Veno's strength in the laning stage. The main consideration on Veno then transitioning out of the laning stage is when do you max your Plague Ward? Like, how much do you need those other abilities? Do you need points in those other abilities to survive the lane, to win the lane, to stomp the lane? And then when can you max your wards? Because you probably want to at least put 1 point into them at level 3 or 4 and then start maxing it from there, but it always depends. And that's kind of the main thing to consider in that portion of the game, because the earlier you max those wards, the better they're going to be, because they have HP and damage that don't really scale later on into the game, because, the enemies only get stronger, they attack more, they do more damage, and so your wards die quicker, and it's not really as effective. So that's the main thing you're going to have to think about in that early portion. From there, then, Veno becomes basically a wall type of hero, sort of similar to a Bristleback or like a Timbersaw, but not really, because those are off-lane heroes, they're not supports, and they kind of take over an area by being super tanky. Veno does it with his wards. And so what you do is you park yourself in a lane, probably defending a tower, maybe like, let's say mid tower, because that is a very important tower that you want to defend, and you just put down your wards everywhere, and you just say, okay guys, try to fight into that, because now you're getting slowed, you're taking damage, they're hitting you a bunch, you know, the creeps are getting distracted, they're not really going all the way into the tower to try to hit the tower, and then you buy some time, you're slowing them as well with your abilities, you're doing damage, you have an ult, and then, your allies can TP in, they can chase people down, all that kind of stuff. It's very difficult to fight into a Veno, especially if he gets good levels and maxes out his wards early. And then the other thing you could do is obviously push. So if, you're pretty strong, you have teammates around you, you want to push a tower that's really important, like the mid tower, like the safe lane enemy safe lane tower, then you can just put a bunch of wards there, kind of build them up over time and just push and be very, very hard to fight into. You can also scout by putting wards on high grounds, and so you can make sure that it's hard to gank you and hard to gank allies that are farming and all that kind of stuff. And that's mainly what you want to be focusing on in that mid portion of the game once you transition out of the laning stage. Then the same is true later in the game, but the wards get weaker, obviously. People, they get higher attack damage, higher attack speed, they get all these other things that can help deal with the wards, make them not as, threatening to actually do damage and to push, but they're still very good for scouting, they're still very good for canceling blink daggers, so they're very good to put on the flanks of wherever you're setting up, like you're setting up to push a tower. You may not put all the wards down to like help push the tower because they're not doing as much damage to tier 2 and tier 3s, but you're putting them on the side, you're putting them on the high ground, you're putting them different places to give vision, to cancel blink daggers, cancel initiation, to see if anyone's kind of trying to flank you or those kinds of things. And that's mainly how you're going to be using those wards later in the game. And then lastly, we're going to talk about team fighting, and I haven't really talked about any other abilities other than the wards, because the wards are really the focus for that mid portion of the game. And then once you transition to the later game, and even throughout the game, your team fighting is kind of the same. You basically just press your ult on somebody. Usually it's somebody that's kind of in the middle of the fight, because obviously, like we saw, the ult kind of spreads to other people over time, so you want to disrupt the enemy's plans. If the enemy initiates, you kind of want to cast the ability on that initiator so that, they can't really go anywhere. They're kited a little bit. They can't do what they want to do. And then if their allies try to help them, then, they have to spread around or they get poisoned as well. So you really disrupt counter initiations, not with stuns, but with just causing a lot of damage and a lot of annoyance for the enemy. And that's how you're going to be using all of your abilities in general in the early game or in the late game in any kind of team fight. And even though you do magic damage and it's damage over time, you might think this hero doesn't scale, but if you can get levels and you can get a lot of items, you actually scale fairly well. Like, it can be very, very annoying for enemy heroes to deal with all the damage you're pumping out. And then because of that, because you're going to just, ult maybe, you're going to cast Gale, you're going to do a little bit of this stuff in fights, but then your abilities are kind of long cooldown. Yes, you have wards that are low cooldown, but otherwise, you're not really scared of just running in, casting your abilities, and then being a sacrificial lamb. You're kind of a support that's able to do that. So if you can do that, and it's effective to do that, and you kind of make the enemy waste abilities on you, and you can get off all your spells in a good way, that is something that you might want to do on Veno. Now, obviously, you don't want to feed intentionally, but just consider that Veno can be a sacrificial hero. And that, everyone, is my Veno guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.